Hey, it's Sarah Burke here from the Women in Media podcast. And before we get started on a new episode, could I get you to hit like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell, whichever app you do your podcast listening in. Make sure you're all set up so you know when there's a new episode and you can help spread the word. Oh, and if you're so inclined, could I ask you to leave a review if the app that you're using does that? You're the best. All right, let's get to the show. I'm Sarah Burke, and this is the Women in Media podcast. My guest today may have created her dream job, melding her love of sports and music into one role. But no one ever said that being on TV would be easy.
I remember interviewing a Canadian artist. She was kind of known for like girl power, women empowerment, all this other stuff. And when we sat down for the interview, she looks over to me and she's like, I want to get you a sandwich. You need a sandwich. That was for me a learning experience that it doesn't matter who anybody is. They don't have any right to treat anybody like garbage. And if they do, they don't deserve the time. Go to somebody else. There's like for my job, there's always somebody right behind you.
My guest today is the national sports and music reporter for CityNews, Lindsay Dunn. Welcome to the Women in Media podcast.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, my first question for you is, how do you land the dream of somehow combining your two favorite things, sports and music, in the same reporting position?
I honestly have no idea still. I've only been asked this recently because I didn't actually put it together that this is happening. This is my dream because a lot of people don't know. I'm originally from Regina, Saskatchewan, so I never ever thought I'd live in Toronto and be doing this. But there's a whole bunch of backstory. Like I worked at a radio station in Regina, and then I worked at CityTV, and then I came out to Toronto and I worked at like TSN, Global, all these other things, and blah, 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 blah. Eventually I got a job at CityNews, and I was a producer briefly there, and I was like, hey, you guys used to be the company that had much music. Like they started it back in the day. It's like, you don't have any music content, and I've been reporting on music forever. Like, can I do this? And then my wonderful friend, Danielle Michaud, who now works at Sportsnet, I was her sports producer at the time. So I was producing, and I was like, this is awesome. And then they let me do music. And then when she left to Sportsnet, there was an opening for sports. They're like, well, we would love for you to do them both. I'm like, what? Is this real life? Like, okay. And then since then, it's just been this wild ride of covering all these amazing local or national or international sports stars or music stars, and then putting it together. But it was a lot of work over the last 15 years. I worked for free everywhere. I did radio shows or podcasts or wrote for free and anything I could to get my foot in the door. But that's, long story short, kind of how this job happened.
Also, what's really interesting, I think, about your story, at least from what I've read in your quick bio, is that, you're covering stuff on the BBC from Canada all the time, too. So how did the overseas part of all of this come together?
I'll be honest, I love my job. I do think I'm the luckiest person in the world. It's a lot of hard work, but the BBC thing is something I pinch myself every morning. It's really random how it happened. I was in New York on a trip with a friend, and it happened to be when the Raptors were in their first kind of conference finals. It was wild. And they heard me on ESPN radio in the States, who just they found me on Twitter. So then somebody from BBC contacted me being like, hey, would you be willing to do this? I went on. For some reason, they liked me. Don't know why. And then ever since then, for 6 years, they've had me on almost weekly to not only talk NBA, I talk WNBA, and they highlight that more pretty much than I know in a lot of North American cities that have a flippin' WNBA team. But I love it. They have fun. They love to talk about sports because the NBA and basketball in general has really grown over in there in the last couple of years. And I love it so much, but it's wild to think a kid from Saskatchewan is one of their correspondents to talk about NBA and WNBA. For me, this doesn't make sense, but I'll take it.
No, I love this. You're literally everywhere. Okay. So do you find that there's something that's always been in the back of your mind as you mentioned that you did so much work for free. You mentioned that you've sort of said yes to so many things over the years. What do you think it is in a quality of a reporter, a journalist that brings up these great opportunities that you may just need to be in the right place at the right time for? What are those other fundamentals that carry you through?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know that. That is a really interesting question. I've never been asked before. I know that I am annoying with my work when it comes to my husband, because I love working so much. I have a true passion for this job. So sometimes I didn't mind working for free, but it's the experience and the conversation and trying to have those stories come out of people that I've always loved since I was little. And I think sometimes it helps me get those opportunities because I feel like my heart is in the right place and hasn't went sour or bitter from this industry that sometimes can be quite harsh, that work ethic is still there. And I like to have fun when it comes to sports and entertainment, where a lot of people take it way too serious for what it is. And I think sometimes that will bring up different opportunities where some people may not get them quite yet because they think it's like we're saving the world, but really it's just sports and entertainment.
I do want to ask you about the guest list, some of the names mentioned of who you've interviewed. What do you think it is that like makes the Drake interview or the Keith Richards interview?
Oh,
like how do you humanize someone as big as Keith Richards or Drake?
Like, well, Drake to me, like, I'm not the only Drake music I know is when it's at the Raptors game. So like, I'm not down with every Drake track. So I understand he's a worldwide sensation, but I didn't idolize him or don't idolize him like so many people do. So just like, hey, this is another person that's talented. This is what happened. But Keith Richards has like impacted so much of my life and my husband's life that my husband was there. He was my camera operator when I met Keith Richards, and my husband was flipping out. He was so nervous. And I think that made me calm to realize like this bozo over here is sweating so much, doesn't know what he's going to do. And I was like, this is Keith Richards. At the end of the day, he's a grandpa. He is a father, like a husband. He's just like all of the great things that he's done for music. At the end of the day, he's also a human that puts their pants on one leg at a time. And I like, with it being Keith Richards, if like, him, he's just an interesting person to interview. And when you hear him talk, so you knew it just was going to be fun. So I was very calm when I went in to interview him. But Dolly Parton, I was sweating buckets. I was terrified to interview her and Barry Gibb because like, this is Dolly, this is Barry, everything they've done. Like, but then sometimes they're just wonderful people. So then it makes them like, hey, we all really are the same. They have millions of more dollars than I have and will ever have. But hey, we're all just human. And I think that's what you have to remember. And I think a lot of people forget.
I'm sure you have a routine for prep at this point in your career. And, I hear a lot of myself with interviews and some of what you're saying, but, there are certain things that I like doing every time for prep. Is there something on your prep list that has to be done or you don't feel quite ready to go?
One thing I will never understand, and this is the one thing I'll have to do when it comes to a music interview, I have to hear the song. I have to hear the entire album. I love reading the liner notes. I want to know who was part of this track, from the production to every little detail. And if I don't get that, I actually feel very nervous and underprepared, which sometimes the artists don't write anything that have anything to do with that song except for sing it, which is a talent in itself. But I have to. So I don't care if this means like hours and hours of prep, but I do not want to do the interview, and I won't do the interview if I can't listen to their album. So what's the point? You're not knowing what you're talking about. You can't connect to the song or try to figure out why they chose to play an instrument this way. I have to listen to the album. And I know that sounds crazy. Maybe when people listen, they're like, oh, you would think, why wouldn't you listen to it? The amount of people that don't listen to someone's music before they interview them is a lot. And they can tell, but I want to know what it sounds like, what they were feeling, and try to connect to the song. And other than that, like, I can't do the interview, but I love hours and hours of prep. Sometimes I don't come up with great questions, but I just want to know it. But I don't like going on social media to read about people at all. And I won't watch other interviews.
Give me an example of when that has come in really handy and had an artist like really open their heart to you and share something special.
Recently is actually Harry Connick Jr. He released an album, and it had, I don't know, more religious tone to it. And he took a different tone on Amazing Grace and even wrote his own kind of, I don't know, Christian. I don't want to say it because I don't actually know the religious domination for it, but I listened to every kind of note, and I listened to the album multiple times, and I picked up on kind of instruments. I was like, what is this? I don't really ever record or remember hearing someone use this before, or he sang this lyric. And so I made sure I wrote this down, and I asked him, and he stopped. He's like, you are the first person I think that has actually listened to the album. I'm like, what? And he did like 30 interviews before me. And then he's like, why did that stick out? I'm like, and I actually could back up why I thought this worked. And then like the next question, I said, I noticed you stopped kind of during this one verse and this instrument came on. I don't know what it is. And then he stopped. He's like, how did you pick this up? You're the only person that, and then he went off the Zoom, grabbed the instrument and brought it in. He's like, I brought this, and it's because this actually was my mom's, and she played it this part, and gave me this really detailed
lovely
connection story to it. And actually had the PR person I was dealing with give him my email address and actually wrote me a note after to say how grateful he was that I actually took the time to listen to the album, which then that's kind of heartbreaking because an artist will put so much work usually into an album or a song, and a lot of people can't take the time for 2 minutes. Like, I understand sometimes listening to 45 minutes is a lot, but it's our job. It's literally our job to research it. But Harry Connick Jr. is the one that stands out the most. Is you could tell that he appreciated that there was any effort at all put into the interview.
Well, it also takes loads of experience to get to this point where you know that you're getting, these moments, special moments with people that you're interviewing. How about maybe a lesson learned from an early interview in your career, maybe back in Saskatchewan, that didn't work out so well?
Oh, I still have those moments. It happens. Some people, they'll look at me and they just don't like me. Yeah, like they just don't like me. I'm like, well, that's your point. If the fact they don't like that, I'm happy. But I remember interviewing a Canadian artist. I will not name her.
That's okay.
But she was kind of known for like girl power, women empowerment, all this other stuff. And I was like, great. Like, I want to showcase you to the world too. There might be the odd person that doesn't know you, or maybe everybody knows you. I don't know. And when we sat down for the interview, she looks over to me and she's like, I want to get you a sandwich. You need a sandwich. And I remember just kind of being confused by the question, like maybe my stomach growled, but no, like when she read it, it's because she thought I was underweight or like whatever. It was not called for. And I still to this day don't understand what was their problem, but I let that completely consume me for the entire interview. And I aired that interview, like minus that part. I was like, I shouldn't have given somebody that had such hate in their heart any airtime. So there's literally millions of other people. But that was for me a learning experience that it doesn't matter who anybody is. They don't have any right to treat anybody like garbage. And if they do, they don't deserve the time. Go to somebody else. There's like for my job, there's always somebody right behind you. But that was a huge learning experience. Is like, it doesn't matter who anybody is. If they don't treat you or anybody like a human, they're not worth anybody else's time.
Wow. I don't know what I would do in that situation, but yeah, that would have taken me by surprise. And I don't know if I would have, it's almost like you don't know how to recover from something like that. When you think back to, that story you just told me right now, is the lesson learned there to bring everyone down to the same level playing field as you're talking to them, kind of the same as the Keith Richards? Yeah.
Cause like if sometimes I will put somebody on a higher pedestal if they are like this wonderful person that does amazing things for the community and they give back. But I mean that like they're doing such good in the world, but it's not like I'm going to go out of my way and go crazy over stuff. But everybody should be on the same playing field. If they think they're better than me, that's their choice to think that they're better than me. I do not think I'm better than anybody. Oh my goodness, no. But at the end of the day, we're all from the same flipping planet. That was my lesson, is like, just be nice to people. It is not that hard to be kind. And that's the hardest part I have in the world is I don't get why people are so hateful, so negative. Like if you don't like something, just move on and live your life the way that you choose to live it. But that was the thing. You're right though. It's like, everybody's on the same playing field. It doesn't matter if they have 1 million records, $1 billion, just be nice.
Yeah, that's like the least you can do in this business.
It's very hard for people to do that. I'm sure you've experienced that multiple times as well in all areas of this field of lovely journalism.
For sure. It's interesting too. I'm thinking to like, the posts like from Jonah Hill about body image.
Oh.
So I mean, whether it's body image or just, style, fashion, have you had anything? I mean, this was in the case you just told me, it was like the person you were interviewing, but what about like viewership on TV? Like that audience can be wonderful, but it can also be ruthless. Yeah. How do you deal with, negative comments, which every single person in our line of work has to deal with, the people hiding behind their screens?
And it's even people in the industry that say we're coworkers with, or they're your boss. I'm not talking about my job right now, but previously, just how critical they'll be of something you wear, how you look, or how your hair is. The amount of comments I get, like I actually don't read mentions on social media. Mostly it's like, I don't care. I don't know why a lot of people care about what I'm doing, but for the most part, I don't like go on social media and scroll through stuff a long time because I find it a waste of my time. But I see sometimes somebody will send me a screenshot, be like, just so you know, this is on Instagram or whatever. And it'll be someone either or YouTube commenting about how my work should pay for me to get a boob job. I'm like, well, if they got a boob job, how would that improve my journalism? Like, how would that improve that interview in any way? Or about my face, or about my dress not being tight enough, or my dress being too loose, or why are you wearing dresses to cover basketball or hockey or whatever? It is constant for like the 12 years I've been doing this all day. And it's like, it doesn't bother me anymore. Like, it's annoying. It's like, I know for a fact most men do not get these comments about what they're choosing to wear. But because of it, for like the first 7 years of my career, I only wore blazers and like pantsuits, which is not me. The odd time I'll wear it, but it's very like constricting. I hate pants in general. I'm lazy.
You feel like you're like moving around like that.
I'm a robot. And it's just uncomfortable. Whereas like a dress is the laziest thing you can wear. And that is why I wear it. And like, I used to only wear high heels, and now I wear just like, I wear Converse or wear sneakers because it's comfortable. And that is who I am. And if they're upset by this when they watch this on TV, or if they listen and they're annoyed over the fact that I will bring up an entertainment bit about the president of the Blue Jays, how he loves Chris Stapleton, switch the channel. There's worse things in life than to be so upset, but all the time. It is about every part of my body, anything I wear. And it took me years to not give a rat's I don't know if we can swear, but a rat's ass about it, because it's my life. And if I'm not wearing something offensive, and I can do what I want and I can wear what I want. And if you don't like it, then man, you have a pretty good life. If that's your biggest issue, is that a TV reporter is wearing a dress that you think is inappropriate to be wearing inside a hockey rink.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, wow. And I just think like a lot of them are just angry, and it's usually, but sometimes they'll come up to you in person and just rip you a new one. I'm like, well, I hope that made you feel better.
Has anything ever happened like live during a shoot that I'm sure it has. It's more about I guess you choosing one that you want to share. But I remember during a live broadcast, this is just like, rock radio afternoon show, when I was doing afternoons in London. It was a patio broadcast once a week. So at the bar, there were certain promos, people could come win, enjoy some food with us, whatever. It was around the time that the In the Pussy was going on.
Oh yeah, my coworker Shauna. Yeah, that happened to her at TFC.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe, it ended up being a young guy, young jock who just thought it was very funny, like a 20-year-old kid who screamed it into my microphone as I was live on the air. There was nothing I could do about it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, how do you recover in a moment like that? It's
happened a couple times. Like, I hate to say, thankfully, most of it's happened not live. It shouldn't happen at all, but a couple times people have yelled at or have actually been groped on air, in a crowd and all that stuff, when it's just a rowdy event. And I remember one time it just caught me so off guard that it's like, I apologize for anybody that heard or saw that. And then I just went on with it. And I'm like, why did I go on? You're not allowed it, but I would slap that person in the face on TV. But it's happened a couple times where I just said, I apologize to the viewers, and I moved away and then went there. And when I think about that now, I'm like, that's not okay. That is not right. Because nobody, however you identify, should be assaulted or groped on their job, whatever you do. But it's happened. And that's how I recovered, is I just kind of moved and pivoted live on air and just said hey, anyways, this is what's happening. Let's focus on this. And you get lots of nice email oh, you handled it so well, or you should have punched them, or what the heck's wrong with you? Yeah. But off air, when it wasn't live, I've been interviewing athletes sometimes. Mostly the biggest issue I have is people within the industry tend to be a little bit more vulgar and uninvited with their comments. But I've had athletes where I've interviewed them in the past in the locker room that the camera will be on me, we're talking, and a lot of times I am either the only girl or maybe one of two or three in the locker room, and they will come stand right beside me naked, having their tiny ding-a-ling by my face, trying to phase me, and I will not look. And I just remember it's happened before, and I've had friends that were in there when I'm trying to, and it's humiliating, but I don't say anything. I just remember I focused on the interview, and then I got up and left. And all those times, it's changed quite a bit over the years, but that has happened more than a handful of times. It's what?
Okay, so that's, a little bit of the BS that we sometimes have to deal with behind the scenes. But, on camera, you are so confident when you're interviewing. And to be able to do that with, like, say, Kobe Bryant, the same way that you would with Keith Richards, like, that's a skill that not everyone has. I want to pivot to some of your sports coverage now because it is hard to be a woman in sports. And, you've spoken about some of the hardships. What about showcasing a story that you don't think you heard elsewhere? Because a lot of the time there's so much competition between networks and coverage.
That is my favorite thing to do. And I know a lot of other reporters in this industry, they can't stand me. It doesn't bother me, but I know they can't stand me because I don't want to do the traditional interview of like, oh, your 3-pointer has been off. You've only made so much of this, or how's your stick handling go, or your footwork on the pitch, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, everybody has that story. So I'm like, what happened in your day that led to you having this performance today? What music were you listening to, or whatever happened, or things that make them happy outside of the sport? Because that is a different story. And for the most part, they react so well to it because they're like, finally, I'm being asked a question that isn't about the sport, but it actually impacts the sport. I love getting those answers. Like the Mark Shapiro interview I talked about earlier with the Jays. He couldn't talk about like any of the trades that were happening. He would have got fined, all this other stuff. So really it's like, well, there's not a lot we can talk about right now. So I just said like, tell me how your day started. He's like, oh, I got this new Chris Stapleton album. And then we went into this and how music impacts kind of how his process throughout his day and all that stuff. And I know nobody else had that. But of course, you get a lot of hate mail because like, you shouldn't be doing sports. This is what girls can't do sports. I'm like, well, I guarantee nobody else would have had an interview because he just would have said no comment, no comment, no comment, which like, it's annoying. But I love it. And especially because covering the sports and having like, I am the producer of their sports. Like I'm a 1-person band here. I get to pick showcasing female athletes all the time. Like there's a phenomenal cyclist out of Ontario named Ruby West, and like her quest to go to the Olympics, and knowing nobody else has that story and just that they get to share it. I don't even have to be on the TV for it. It's a big moment for them and the goals they're trying to make. And if somehow you're a little blip in there, if that's the rewarding part. Like, I don't care that I'm on TV. It's actually uncomfortable that people see my face because I hate brushing my hair and all that. But like getting to hear those stories and share them is the best part of this whole job. And it's why I went into it. And I really hope that doesn't go away.
Well, what was the moment that you knew you had to do this for a living? If we go back to Regina.
The moment I knew that this was an actual career wasn't until like I was grade 12. I didn't even know it was a possibility. My favorite sports writer, I used to like cut their column out all the time with the local paper and all of that and look at it. I just never knew that was a job. And then when I met them, found out this was a career, and then they kind of guided me and like, you can go to school here, here, and here, and these are your paths. And then I went to school at University of Regina, and what a lot of people don't know is I'm actually really shy. So the fact like you're a great interviewer because you're making me talk, but it takes a lot for me to like get warmed up to prepare to interview somebody because I just get really shy and nervous.
I would not have guessed that at all.
Yeah. So University of Regina, I failed miserably because I was really shy and I didn't want to go out of my comfort zone and talk to people to do pieces for the local paper. So I went to school in Calgary where I didn't know a soul. And then you're forced to be pushed out of your comfort zone. And that really helped me. And that's what I was like, this is something I can go for. I don't care what it is I do in this industry. I started off as a board op at a radio station and I loved every moment of that. Yep. And then that's when I was like, I can do this. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I'm going to love every flipping moment of it. And I have. There's some days that really suck. There's some parts of this industry that are brutal that I wish didn't exist. But yeah, it wasn't until I was like grade 12. And then after college, I'm like, I really actually can do this magical job.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that was mentorship? Like the person that you were speaking about, like locally, that sort of helped you look at schools and stuff?
Oh yeah, because I didn't even know really you could move out of Regina, Saskatchewan. Anybody I knew stayed there. They never left there. And they either worked for like the local government or something. And I just remember watching like the local TV stations or reading the paper and hearing people on the radio. Wow, it's really cool, but never knew it was a chance or an opportunity I could do. So if it wasn't for that mentorship, I don't know what I would be doing. So I'm going to tell you now, don't ask me what I would be doing because I have no idea.
So Regina to Calgary, bit of a bigger city there, but then did it go Calgary to Toronto?
No, it went.
What was in between?
Calgary, I finished school and immediately got hired at CityTV Regina, where for like a week I worked in digital and then I was doing sports. And then I was on their morning show when it launched for years. And then I went from Regina to Toronto, and not having been in Toronto for like 14 years before that.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that was like really overwhelming and also fun, because people were like, is Regina in Winnipeg? Or where is it? Like, oh my gosh, this is so upsetting. But I love it here. I don't regret anything, because like it's the only place there's an NBA team, there's an NBA G League team, but the concerts, everything. And it still is a culture shock, because when you go back to Regina and then you come back here, it's just.
Well, I was going to say, what was your biggest culture shock when you finally arrived in Toronto? Like something you were just not expecting that impacted your job?
So if anybody's been to Toronto or Carabana's on,
Oh, yeah.
I moved that weekend and I live right beside where it happens. So it took an hour and a half for us to move, like a block in the car. I've never seen that many people in my life before that. It was a lot. And yeah, that's the thing when events are able to come back, just the amount of people still is like, you're all in the same place that I am. I don't understand this.
I imagine you went through something similar with like Raptors Championship, everyone gathered like for the parades and all that kind of stuff.
Now, here's a tidbit people don't know. I actually chose not to cover the parade. I know, that's wild.
Whoa.
There's way too many people. You knew it was going to be chaos. I just flew back actually from London, England, like the night before, but I was here for the parade. And I was like, I'm going to sit this one out. I actually didn't even watch it until like maybe a year later for the anniversary, but it was like, it's so many people. And I don't think any of us anticipated it would have been that long, but I just chose not to go. I'm like, it's too many people. And those are one of the days we're all going to get the same story. I'll let everybody enjoy that moment and not be in the way throwing a mic in their face.
What a valuable lesson too in this industry is like knowing when you're not going to have an exclusive and you don't need to bust your ass.
Well, and I rarely say no to anything. I just knew that I was so burnt out by the end of that. I actually got sick during the championship run. Like you're on the morning show, then you're doing stuff for radio and TV all night. And then I was still doing BBC stuff at night. So I'd be lucky if I averaged an hour of sleep a night, not complaining. It was a wonderful experience, but I got sick and there was no balance, and it just took its toll. And so I knew going to the parade, I also wouldn't have enjoyed it. I was just so tired, but I took a beat. And I think that was like one of the few times in 12 years I've said no and took a moment, because I'm lucky I was in the position that I could say no though.
I'm really bad at saying no to stuff too. I'm someone who tends to say yes to everything. And I have certainly felt the burnout, especially during the pandemic, working from home and little less separation between work and home life. As you can see,
Zoomapaloozas all day, every day. Like, oh, hey, we'll give you 15 Zooms in an hour. You got this.
Because you're in a different stage of your career now where you don't have to say yes to everything. What are the things that bring you the most joy, especially because you're picking like from sports and entertainment?
I would say I still have to say yes to everything. I don't know if I have to, but I feel that way because there's thousands of people behind me trying to get my job. And the amount of emails of people being like, they want my job or I don't deserve my job. I know I deserve my job, but it's just, I always feel like if I don't cover this, somebody else will. And then what is the point of me? And also, if I don't cover this, that's not going to get played anywhere. And especially when it comes to women's sports. So I say yes to almost everything, which will sometimes make for 22-hour days. And I am not joking. And it's like, I also want to do the research. I don't want to ask somebody for help to do the research if they're not doing it, because then I'm wasting their time. They should get rewarded and do the interviews. But that is mostly my fault. Nobody's said that someone's going to actually take my job, but I feel like it's just such a small industry too that you got to keep going at and hitting the pavement rather. But what still brings me joy is a couple of things, like talking to new artists when it's their first single. Like I love Nate Holler. He's an Ontario musician that was just so excited recently had a single that just skyrocketed, and just a very genuine, happy person that's so excited to talk about like their new music and that brings you joy because you know how happy they are.
Yeah, he was in our top of the country with SiriusXM. Yeah.
Just a wonderful person. You're just like, I hope you have all the success. So interviews like that. And then I really still love covering all sporting events. Like I love it. Like being able to cover the Jays run that didn't end the way people wanted. Every time I walk out onto the field, like I look around, it still just takes me back. Like, I can't believe that I'm doing this. This is great. And getting those one-on-ones with the players where they don't want to talk about their sports and just have fun, like George Springer telling me dad jokes, is just one of my favorite memories of the year.
Yeah.
And so that stuff brings me joy when you get to have a conversation with somebody and not talk about what their field is or like their specific job, or somebody that like they're just starting out because they still have that joy and that passion, and the negativity of the world hasn't totally completely destroyed them.
You might need a minute for this, but you have to pick your favorite sports interview and why, and your favorite entertainment interview and why.
Oh, why?
I'm sorry, but you knew it was coming. Come on.
No, I didn't, but I like that you asked. Like, if I'm actually breaking out in a sweat, everybody, I will quickly say, and I've said this so many times on air and everywhere, the one person that I want to interview still I haven't is Ricky Martin. I have loved Ricky Martin since 1999, that I own every Spanish album and tried to learn Spanish because I just think they're such a wonderful human and performer. So with that being said, my favorite sports interview of all time, I'd probably still go with Magic Johnson, and that was like 10 years ago. I love basketball and the Lakers because of Magic and his personality and who he is and just how he was on the court. He's so joyful and passionate and full of life and genuinely kind that would say hi to everybody in the room, remember their names, and it just made me appreciate them even more. Oh, and then music interview. Like Keith Richards obviously is my favorite of all time, Dolly, but I would just like to throw out like Brothers Osborne because I really love them as humans, and I love their album Skeletons that came out last year. It's one of my favorite albums of the year. They just were fun, and they had no, like, when you do an interview, like, you know this, but maybe some people at home don't, you have a guideline of what you're allowed to ask. Yeah. Sometimes they didn't care. There was nothing was on. They just wanted to talk about music, talk about life, have fun.
Which is hard to come by with a name as big as Brothers Osborne.
Yeah. Usually, like, sometimes you have to sign NDAs. A lot of the times you have to, and you're told, like, don't ask this, or this. And it's like, well, usually I'm not going to ask about people's personal life because I don't care. It's their life. Mm-hmm. Brothers Osborne, I just love that album and I just wanted to talk about it. And I think they fed off that energy of me just being like, this is amazing. You shredded guitar on this song, that they were just so joyful. And like one of them's a painter, and they just have such a love for like family and life that I think was one of my favorites of the last year, because that's what I'm at.
What about an emotional interview? Like an interview where it was hard almost for you to keep your composure because you were really feeling the emotions of the person you were interviewing?
Oh, there over the last year, there's been a lot with Black Lives Matter, and like I can't relate to it. Like if people don't know what I look like I'm very, very white, and I'm from the middle of Saskatchewan, and hearing a lot of the stories, which like I said, I can't relate to. It's just heartbreaking that every moment of their life when they look at something or they wear something, they live in fear. And that is with multiple artists, athletes, whatever it may be. Hearing that over the last year, like, and I'm like, I felt bad. I'm like, I don't want to cry. I felt bad that I got so worked up because I'm not experiencing what they have to. I just wanted to make the world not such a garbage place. But then I wasn't able to air an interview I did with a female athlete recently, but I can say it's because we decided after, like, she didn't want to air it, but just a lot of the times people know being a female athlete is not easy. The amount of hate you get for the sport you do. They were a WNBA player and like they're a star. They broke down on the interview because like no matter what I do, people always say like, oh, you don't play like this male NBA player. You're not good enough. You only make this much money, or commenting on the way they look, or nothing ever was just about the game. Even in some of their post or pre-game press conferences, it was about it, and they were just tired. And I asked them a basketball question, and they were just like, thank you for asking me about my sport in this sense, because sometimes like where others want to talk about it, some they just want to finally be asked about their craft. And they just were so tired of the constant negativity and not being told, like being told you're not good enough, that I cried with them, because I only in a moment feel a little bit of what they have. Because when I air female sports stories, the amount of negativity I get on those is, it's coming. And then I'm like, as an athlete, that's times like 1,000, and to their face on any social media, on nothing. They can't get away from it. And that's one that recently I couldn't keep it together.
You and I We are white women and we have experienced privilege, right?
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but when George Floyd happened and, looking at what, colleagues and friends who are Black, what they have been going through their entire lives, I found it really hard to figure out my place and what I can do and how I can eradicate racism. I know I don't have the answers. I know I play a role. And I'm just curious because you sort of brought it up yourself too. Like, where did you find yourself in that moment? Even just covering a Black Lives Matter story and not having Black skin.
Oh yeah, it's like I shouldn't be doing this. This is not my place. But like, as in like, I believe it should get told.
Of
But
course.
who am I to talk about it? Like I can't relate at all. I felt like I would never do it justice. And so there's fellow journalists that asked, like, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I just feel like I want to help. I can't believe, honestly, how is this the world that we live in? And I know coworkers of mine, they get called inappropriate names and like discussing racist stuff all the time. And that's like not new. And you try to help them. And then if somebody's around is saying like, we're sorry this happened, but it's been really hard because I still don't know what to do. All I know is with this platform that I'm not searching somebody out for the color of their skin, but I make an effort to make sure that representation there's more of, because there's just a lot of white people that voices seem to be a little bit louder. So it's like, if I can at all somehow use a platform I have to share other voices that have great stories and maybe make more of an effort, just be more conscious of what I'm putting on air. Because other times I'm just like, oh, this is a good story, we'll put it on air, to make sure that all voices are heard. Like, especially when it came to some athletes, like I wasn't hearing, or artists, like they didn't have the big PR names behind them. So it's like, if they're reached out to me in a DM and they were legit, I'm like, let's do this. That's the only thing I need to do. I still am learning. I've read books, I've spoken to people. It's just, I don't know if anybody has the answers. Just, I know people are trying, and it's the same thing at the end of the day. It's like, don't be an asshole, be kind, don't be racist. How is this hard, people?
I'm just looking at, some of your accolades from your career here. Of course, your publicist provided me with a few notes, but, I'm seeing that you've been nominated and have won a couple different Canadian Screen Awards. Is there one that means more to you than the other, nomination or award or otherwise? And how do you view awards?
I'll be honest, none of them mean more to me than the other. They don't really mean anything to me. I'm sorry. Like, it's great if people like awards. I just don't, it doesn't validate me at all if I get nominated for best sports anchor or best entertainment reporter or best whatever it is. Something I'd rather work on is like best community service person or best, I don't know, like, and it's just, it also adds to too many egos in this industry and in life that I don't understand why people have them for most of the part, because of what it is. But yeah, I don't care for awards at all. I'm not the kind of person that will have them on a shelf behind me. I like to showcase my records because that brings me great joy. But I get why some people, like, I even feel weird on social media. Like, it is part of the job. You're supposed to post about like what you're doing and who you're interviewing. Like, oh man, that just feels so performative and just weird that I have to get used to. But yeah, I don't care about awards at all. But congratulations to people that really like them.
You're coming up on, I'm going to say, 2 decades of your career. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Don't be an asshole. Sorry for swearing. This industry is far too small, and I didn't take it serious enough, because when I was in my early 20s, I'm 35 right now, everybody. Don't care about age. It's just a number. But you think like, hey, you're in the middle of Saskatchewan, people are in your class from somewhere else, or you're in Calgary and people are from wherever, like, you'll never see them again. And you can be really catty, doesn't matter, whatever it is. And people are mean. Like, I've had people delete my scripts right before I went on air. And then it's like, you end up working with them. Like, there's multiple people I work with in Toronto that have worked back out west that just were not nice people. And they like won't acknowledge me. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like,
I've had my fair share of the, like, how many times are you going to say nice to meet you when I know you've met me several times? And
we work together on the same flipping show. And so that is it. And anytime I speak to journalism students or just anybody that wants to get in this industry, I'm like, be nice, because you're going to see somebody again. But just in general, that's not a hard rule to live by. Like, sure, things will upset you. Be nice. And if somebody has a job you want, or they have an interview you want, I use it as motivation. Although I really don't care what other people do. It's like, if this makes me happy, I'm going to do it. But that's a huge thing too, is I stay off social media because back in the day when Instagram and that came out, you spend so much time to see what other people are doing, but really it doesn't matter. And that took a while for me to learn. And so that's just be nice and don't care what other people are doing. And that's a hard thing for anybody in life to do, is not to care what other people think about you or what they're doing. Because I think that's an ongoing battle, but I've definitely been able to kind of hone that in over the last couple of years. And my goodness, I'm way happier for it.
You know, we might have to call this episode "Don't Be an Asshole."
Yes, please do.
Well, it connects so well with what you were saying earlier about, you know, even these huge names that you're interviewing. Keith Richards puts his pants on one leg at a time. So does Dolly Parton. So does Lindsay Dunn, your local CityNews reporter.
Except for she hates pants so hard. So like she puts
Which is why she goes the lazy dress route, not because she's trying to show off some skin, but because it's basically the next best thing to sweatpants.
Bam. But also it's like when you talk about how all these other people, it's like, and then like how I say, yeah, we're all just people. Like I still get excited when I meet people or get to interview them, but nothing for me is worse in this job when say you really appreciate someone's song or you really appreciate them as an athlete and they're a complete a-hole. So there's so many records that I've given away after interviewing somebody. It's like, I do not deserve to be treated like that. Or you did not need to be condescending because of this. Like I had somebody say like, do you know who Paul McCartney is?
Oh,
like,
shut up.
Yeah. And so I used to have a large collection of this person's records and I just donated them. I was like, yeah, you're not getting any more of my time and I will not interview you again if it's offered, which it has been. I'm like, no, thank you. It's like, so like, yeah.
So I like to end the podcast by asking you to nominate a couple women that you think have great stories to tell that should be told here on the Women in Media podcast.
Okay. So you've already had like a bunch of doozies on your show, so it's kind of hard to pick any, but Kayla Alexander, she played in the WNBA. She's played in Europe. She has her own like entrepreneurship that she does as well. She played for Team Canada. Phenomenal human and as kind as it can be. She also wrote a children's book that just is phenomenal. And I think she has a great story and multiple stories to be told and a wonderful human. And Jessica Beard is like one of the head PR people at the Blue Jays. Like she is and really kind and has so many stories about that part of the industry. Like I'll never see it. And then that's extremely male dominated, but tons of stories there. I love Christina Fernandez. If anybody's in the music industry in Canada, she's a publicist that has stories to boot and is hilarious and also loves sports. And I don't know a person who doesn't like her, but she has so many great stories that I just want everyone to hear them. And she'll be mad I said that.
She's going to be so pissed that she's nominated because she might actually have to take me up on my invite. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and being so forthcoming about your experience, good and bad, in entertainment and sports. I hope that we get to meet in person, hopefully at a large sporting or music event.
That would be amazing. And I'm going to wear a shirt saying I'm your number one fan. No big deal. I expect an autograph, a selfie, and all that other jazz. And we'll yell, don't be an asshole.
Does Lindsay have a point or what? Why is it so hard not to be an asshole? It's such a simple piece of advice, right? But something I truly believe we could all be reminded of sometimes. So you can follow along with Lindsay's coverage of everything from the Toronto Raptors or her recent conversation with Sting. I've put links to her social accounts in the episode notes. Next up on the Women in Media podcast, a colleague of mine who I'm lucky to call a friend, Alison Dorr. She not only hosts The Breakdown on SiriusXM's Canada Talks, but she's also the founder and CEO of Howl and Roar Records, a female-centric comedy label. And finally, if you could give this podcast a follow on your social networks at Women in Media Pod and hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast service, that gets these conversations with great women into more ears and feeds. Thank you so much for listening.
This one time in Russia, I had boots with the fur and apple-bottom jeans before it was a thing.
This one time in Russia, my baba got mad at me for going out with wet hair.
This one time in Russia, I had to put on all the clothes in my suitcase because it was so cold.
And I should have listened to her because that same baba gave me a shot of vodka and a whole slice of lemon, rind and all, to cure my cold.
Well, if you're interested in these stories and more, come check us out at the Russian Sisters Podcast.
The Russian Sisters, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and at therussiansisters.com.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.